I never expected the person I loved most to treat me like I didn't matter. My own brother, the one who used to hold my hand when I was scared of the dark, looked me straight in the eyes and told me I was irrelevant. It shattered something in me. But I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I picked up the phone, made one call, and everything changed. What happened after that? Even I wasn't ready for it. My name is Jessica Monroe. And in my family, I was always the one who sat just off to the side, not out of shyness, but by choice. Or at least, that's what I told myself. The quiet one. The observer. The person who stayed calm when voices rose and tempers flared. I used to think being the peacemaker meant strength. That it meant I was emotionally mature. In control. But the truth is, sometimes silence isn't noble. Sometimes, it's survival. Ever since I can remember, Mason was the star. My older brother, the prototype of everything my parents ever dreamed a child could be. From the moment he could walk, people noticed him. Big personality. Loud laugh. Natural leader. He played 3 sports by the time he was in middle school, made captain of the soccer team, got his picture in the local paper for most promising youth athlete at 15. And every time he came home with another ribbon, another trophy, another glowing report card, Mom and Dad lit up like Christmas lights. He's a born leader, Dad would say, pride swelling in his voice. That boy's going places. And I'd just nod and smile, even when my chest ached a little. No one ever said I wasn't enough, not outright, but when your sibling is treated like a walking miracle, it's hard not to feel like background noise. I wasn't bad at anything. I got decent grades, helped around the house, never got into trouble. But my art projects hung on the fridge for maybe a week before they were replaced with Mason's latest accomplishments. My A- in AP English? Good job, sweetheart. Mason's C in chemistry after a big game? You tried your best, son, that's what counts. I got used to it. Learned how to blend in. I told myself I didn't need the spotlight. I didn't want it. After all, someone had to be the steady one. The listener. The fixer when things broke. And in a weird way, it gave me a sense of control. If I wasn't the favorite, then I couldn't fall from grace, right? But that illusion cracked the summer after Mason's engagement party. It was a humid August evening, and we were gathered at our parents' house, a cozy but aging 2-story in upstate New York, the kind with creaky wood floors and screen doors that always slammed shut a second too loud. The kind of place that smelled like cinnamon in the fall and old laundry detergent in the summer. I stood in the corner of the living room with a glass of lemonade, watching Mason and his fiancée, Callie, soak in the attention like royalty. He looked polished, charming as ever. And Callie, bless her, was the definition of grace, soft-spoken, intelligent, way too good for him. I liked her. I'd just finished complimenting her dress, a soft lavender satin that brought out her eyes, when Mason walked up, looping an arm around her shoulders like she was a trophy he'd won. You enjoying the party, Jess? He asked, flashing me his signature grin. I am. You two make a great couple, I said genuinely. He gave a small chuckle, but his eyes scanned the room like he was already bored. Then, without warning, he leaned in a little too close and whispered just loud enough for only me to hear, you know, Jess, people like you don't really get these kinds of moments. You're just not the type. I blinked. At first, I thought I misheard him. Or that it was some weird attempt at a joke. But then he smirked, that half-crooked, patronizing smile he wore when he knew he'd gotten under someone's skin. What do you mean by that? I asked, my voice sharp, surprising even myself. He sipped his beer and shrugged. I mean, you're quiet. You kind of fade into the background. You're not, memorable. You don't exactly take up space, Jess. People forget you're even there sometimes. And just like that, the air felt heavier. I could hear my own heartbeat, fast, uneven. My fingers curled tighter around my glass, and for a split second, I genuinely wondered what it would feel like to throw it at him. But instead, I swallowed hard, gave a polite nod, and walked away. My ears were ringing. I made my way out to the back porch, the wooden boards creaking beneath my sandals as I leaned on the railing and stared into the dark yard. The cicadas buzzed so loudly I could barely think, but that one sentence kept replaying in my head like a broken record: you don't take up space. People forget you're there. That night, something shifted in me. I thought I'd been content playing the background character in Mason's story, the invisible sister, the stable support. But hearing it confirmed, hearing that he, my brother, saw me that way? Like I was some sort of placeholder in his world? That hurt. And not just the way a paper cut stings. No. It cracked something deep. Like a fault line splitting open. I lay awake for hours that night, staring at the ceiling fan spinning lazily above me in my childhood bedroom. The faded posters on the wall, the scratched desk in the corner, even the scent of the lavender sachet Mom used to tuck into my drawers, it all felt suffocating now. Like I was drowning in a life where I had always been the afterthought. I thought about every time Mason had cut me off mid-sentence at the dinner table. Every time he made a decision for the family without asking me. Every time Mom and Dad celebrated his wins while giving me the obligatory good job nod. And worst of all, I remembered the favor I'd done for him last year. The one no one else knew about. The one that could have cost me everything if things had gone south. And he had the audacity to say I didn't matter? I got up, padded across the room in my socks, and pulled out an old shoebox from the bottom of my closet. Inside, buried under sketch pads and dried-up pens, was the USB drive. The one with the voicemail. My heart pounded as I held it in my hand, this tiny piece of plastic that contained everything. I stared at it for a long time. Part of me didn't want to use it. I wasn't vindictive. I didn't like drama. But the other part, the part that had been dismissed, ignored, belittled, she was tired. Tired of being the doormat. Tired of smiling through pain. Tired of pretending that being quiet meant being weak. I sat down at my desk, plugged the USB into my laptop, and played the voicemail. Jess, please. I messed up, Mason's voice crackled through my cheap laptop speakers. I had a few drinks. Not a lot, I swear, but enough to get pulled over. You're the only one I can trust not to tell Mom and Dad. Please help me, I'll owe you forever. Forever, huh? I smiled bitterly and pressed pause. That night, I didn't sleep. My thoughts raced in 100 directions: guilt, anger, fear, satisfaction. I thought about deleting it. Then I thought about burning the entire house down. Not literally. Probably. By the time the sun started to rise, casting pale gold light through my curtains, I knew exactly what I had to do. I reached for my phone, opened my contacts, and hovered over one name, Callie. I hadn't spoken to her much outside of family gatherings, but I always got the sense she was smarter than Mason gave her credit for. Maybe she deserved to know what kind of man she was marrying. I didn't press call. Not yet. But I held my thumb over the button. Because something inside me had finally woken up. And that was the moment I stopped being silent. It started like a slow leak, small, almost unnoticeable at first, the kind of thing you ignore because it doesn't seem like a big deal, until it floods everything. The dinners were where it began. Family meals at our house had a certain rhythm: Mom would cook too much, Dad would chew too loudly, and Mason would fill every silence with his booming voice and over-the-top stories. I never minded that part. I liked listening, staying on the edges, only chiming in when there was a lull. But somewhere along the way, Mason decided those silences weren't for sharing. They were for performing. And I became part of his act. I remember one night, it was around the holidays, I think. The air smelled like garlic bread and rosemary, and the heat from the oven made the windows fog slightly. The table was set with mismatched plates, and soft jazz hummed from the kitchen speaker. I was talking, just a small story about something I'd read, nothing world-changing, when Mason cut in. "God, Jess," he laughed, shaking his head. "You really have a gift for making anything sound boring." Everyone chuckled. Even Dad gave a half-smile as he took another sip of his wine. I smiled too. A thin, brittle thing that cracked at the edges. "It was just a story," I said quietly, trying to pass it off like I wasn't embarrassed. But I felt it. The warm flush climbing up my neck. The throb behind my eyes. The way my shoulders tensed as if bracing for another blow. It kept happening. Subtle digs wrapped in sarcasm. Little comments about how I still lived at home, or how I hadn't figured out what to do with my life yet, or how I probably had too much time on my hands. And every time, he'd laugh. Everyone else would laugh. And I would shrink a little more. "You know I'm just joking," he'd say, flashing that disarming grin. "Right. Just joking. That's what you say when you don't want to take responsibility for being cruel." I tried not to take it personally. I really did. Because that's what we're taught, isn't it? That family gets a free pass. That siblings tease each other. That it's just part of growing up. Toughen up. Don't be so sensitive. But the truth is, even if the jabs are just jokes, they leave bruises, they just don't show up on skin. And yet, I kept showing up. Kept sitting at that table. Kept laughing when he needed a punchline. Because I thought maybe if I played along, he'd stop. Maybe if I didn't react, it wouldn't hurt. But it did hurt. Every single time. Then came the night everything unraveled. It was a quiet Tuesday evening, and I'd just gotten back from a long walk. The sun had dipped behind the trees, casting a warm orange glow through the windows, and the house was mostly dark except for the light above the hallway closet. That's where I kept my sketchbooks, tucked behind old board games and a dusty shoebox of VHS tapes we never threw out. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. I wasn't sneaking around. I just wanted to draw. But the moment I reached for the closet door, I froze. Voices. Mason's, unmistakably. And Callie's, softer, more hesitant. They were in the guest room, door half closed, talking low, but the sound carried through the hall like a wind I couldn't shut out. "She just doesn't do anything," Mason was saying. His tone wasn't cruel, exactly, just casual. Like he was describing the weather. "Jess just kind of floats through life. No real job, no real plan. She's like background noise." I felt a strange pressure in my chest, like someone had vacuum sealed the air out of the hallway. Callie murmured something I couldn't hear. Then Mason added, "Honestly, she's not that important." The words didn't hit all at once. They rolled in slowly, like thunder. First disbelief. Then confusion. Then an ache. Deep, guttural, like something inside me had caved in. I stood there, paralyzed, one hand gripping the sketchbook I'd just pulled down, fingers trembling around the edges like it was some kind of armor. I wasn't supposed to hear that. I shouldn't have heard that. And yet, now that I had, I couldn't unhear it. Not important. Background noise floats through life. The hallway felt colder than before, the yellow overhead light buzzing faintly like it knew a secret it wouldn't tell. My legs felt stiff, almost wooden, like they didn't know whether to move forward or turn and run. My pulse thudded in my ears. My throat tightened with the beginning of something I refused to name. Was that really how he saw me? My brother? Had he always thought that? Even when I helped him lie to our parents about his failing a class? Even when I drove him to the airport at 4 a.m. without complaint? Even when I stayed home with him the week he got dumped in college and couldn't stop crying? Had all of that meant nothing? I didn't know how long I stood there. Time felt warped, stretched and twisted. When I finally moved, it was slow and mechanical, like I was underwater. I took my sketchbook and went to my room, shutting the door softly behind me. I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at the floor for what must have been hours. My head buzzed with static. My stomach flipped every time I replayed those words in my mind. I knew Mason had an ego, but I didn't know he thought so little of me. That he could say something so diminishing, so final, and not even flinch. I didn't cry. Not that night. Instead, I felt something colder. Not sadness. Not even anger. It was more like a slow, sinking numbness that pressed down on every part of me. The kind of emptiness that makes your own reflection look foreign. That makes your voice sound hollow when you try to speak. The next few days passed like I was floating in a fog. I went through the motions, helped Mom with groceries, cleaned the porch, even made small talk with Dad. But behind every smile was a storm I couldn't quiet. And no matter what I did, Mason's voice echoed in my head like a ghost. She's not that important. I thought about confronting him. Barging into his room and shouting, "Why would you say that?" I rehearsed the words in my head, imagined his face turning pale, imagined him realizing just how much damage he'd done. But every version of that confrontation ended the same, him laughing it off. Calling me too sensitive. Or worse, telling me it wasn't a big deal. I thought about telling Mom. Maybe she'd finally see how he treated me. Maybe she'd stick up for me the way she always did for him. I even opened Instagram once, hovered over the blank story box, and typed, "Funny how the people who claim to love you are the ones who make you feel invisible." I didn't post it. Because what was the point? No one would read between the lines. No one would see me. But then I remembered something. A detail Mason clearly forgot. See, Mason liked to talk. He liked to confide in people when it suited him. When he was scared. When he'd messed up. And last year, he'd messed up bad. A drunk night. A car accident. Nothing fatal, thank God, but enough that it could have ruined him. He called me in tears, begging me to cover for him. And I did. I smoothed it over. Lied to our parents. Even bribed the tow truck guy with a $100 bill I couldn't afford to lose. I saved him. And he'd left me a voicemail that night. A rambling, slurred apology. Gratitude. Panic. Desperation. He thought it was over. That I'd erased it. That I'd forgotten. But I hadn't. Because I may be quiet. I may be invisible to some. But I am not forgetful. I'm the one who pays attention. I'm the one who keeps receipts. See, what Mason conveniently forgot, or maybe assumed I had, was that I already had proof. Solid, undeniable proof of the one time he messed up so badly that the consequences could have wrecked everything he'd worked for. And who did he come running to when it all fell apart? Me. It was a Thursday night in early spring, one of those in-between evenings where the sky can't decide if it wants to drizzle or clear up. The air smelled like wet pavement and pollen, and I had just curled up on the couch with a blanket and a tub of pistachio ice cream when my phone started buzzing. Mason. I remember frowning. He never called me late, and especially not on a weeknight. I almost let it go to voicemail. I'd had a long day, and I was already mentally checked out. But something told me to answer. When I picked up, all I heard was breathing. Uneven. Shaky. Then, his voice, slurred and brittle. Jess. I need you to come get me. My heart dropped instantly. Mason? Where are you? I don't know. Somewhere off Route 8. The cars, it's in a ditch. But I'm okay, I swear. His voice broke, and I could hear the sound of him fumbling with something. Keys? His jacket zipper? Please don't tell Mom or Dad. I had a few drinks. Not a lot. Just enough that, if someone found out, I'd be done. My brain went into autopilot. I threw on a hoodie, grabbed my keys, and flew out the door without even changing out of my pajamas. It was still drizzling when I hit the road, the wipers dragging across my windshield in long, moaning strokes. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel. I found him about 20 minutes later, parked along a stretch of gravel where the guardrail had clearly been scraped. His SUV was tilted off the side of the road, nose down in a shallow ditch, hazard lights blinking in the darkness like a quiet SOS. And there he was, Mason, leaning against the front of the car, hoodie soaked, hands shoved deep in his pockets, hair flattened from the rain. He looked up when I pulled over. You came, he said, voice cracking. Thank God. I didn't yell. I didn't ask questions. I just nodded, took a shaky breath, and said, let's figure this out. It turned out no one had called the police yet. Lucky for him. We managed to get a tow truck on the line, a guy named Rick who'd helped our dad with a flat tire once years ago. I remembered he ran a no-questions-asked side gig. When he showed up, Mason pulled me aside, desperate. Jess, please. I can't have this traced. If the office finds out I was drinking, I'm fired. Gone. My life's over. His eyes were wild, red at the rims, hands trembling. I'll pay him extra, I muttered. But you owe me. And just like that, I slipped $100 bill into Rick's hand and asked him not to mention anything to anyone. It's all off the books, I said, trying to sound calm. He nodded without even blinking. I'm sure it wasn't the first time someone asked for that kind of favor. Mason didn't say much on the ride home. He stared out the window, still pale and jittery, smelling faintly of bourbon and guilt. I could have said a million things. I could have asked him what the hell he was thinking. I could have lectured him like a parent. But I didn't. Because part of me, the peacemaker part, was too tired. And maybe, deep down, I just wanted him to finally appreciate me. When we got back, I helped him sneak inside. Mom and Dad were asleep. We stood at the top of the stairs in the dim glow of the hallway light, the kind that always flickered when you turn it on. Jess, he whispered. I turned. He reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and hit record. I just want you to know, you saved me tonight. I'm serious. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't answered. I didn't say anything. I just gave a small nod. But something about the moment felt heavy. Like it mattered more than either of us fully understood. Just promise me you'll never tell anyone. Please. You're the only one I trust. And then he clicked save. That voicemail? The one where he called me the only person he trusted? I transferred it to my computer the next morning. Backed it up on a USB drive. Not because I had some evil plan. Not because I ever wanted to use it against him. But because something told me I might need it one day, if only to remind myself that I wasn't just some side character in his story. For a while after that, Mason was actually nicer to me. He texted me more. Asked for advice. Thanked me when I helped out around the house. I thought maybe, just maybe, we were finally breaking through the wall that had been there since childhood. I started letting my guard down. I let myself believe that maybe he did see me. That maybe I did matter. And then, a year later, I heard him tell his fiancée I was invisible. That I didn't do anything. That I wasn't important. Important. That word echoed like a gunshot. I sat on the edge of my bed that night, knees drawn to my chest, the USB drive resting in the palm of my hand like a secret weapon. The same hands that had gripped the wheel that night, trembling with fear that he might go to jail, that he might get hurt. The same hands that had handed over the $100 bill. That had kept his secret. And all of it, all the loyalty, the sacrifice, the silence, it meant nothing to him. Because in his mind, I was still just the girl who floated through life. The afterthought. The shadow. The background noise. I turned on my laptop, inserted the drive, and opened the file. His voice came through the speakers, fragile and raw. Jess, please, you're the only one I trust. I can't lose everything. Just, help me. Please. I closed my eyes. I let the words wash over me. The panic in his tone. The way he clung to me like a life raft when he thought his world was ending. How quickly he'd forgotten. How easily he'd rewritten the story to make himself the hero again. I helped him when no one else would. I protected him when he didn't deserve it. And he repaid me by turning me into a joke. I could have erased the file. I could have deleted it and kept pretending none of it happened. But I didn't. Because for once, I didn't want to be the peacemaker. I didn't want to be the person who swallowed every insult, who turned every slight into forgiveness. I wanted to remember. I wanted him to remember. Because if Mason thought I was weak just because I didn't shout, then he clearly forgot. I was also the one who kept receipts. I didn't want to ruin him. I need you to understand that. I didn't sit there twiddling my fingers like some cartoon villain, plotting his downfall with a smug little grin. That's not who I am. That's never been me. I'm not the type who gets joy from watching someone suffer, especially not someone I used to idolize. But I did want him to feel it. The sting. The echo. The weight of the words he tossed out so casually, like I didn't have a heart that could bruise. Like I wasn't a person with a memory long enough to remember how many times he let me shrink just to make himself feel bigger. I didn't want to destroy his life. I just wanted him to see mine. To finally see that I existed. It was a Friday afternoon when I made the call. The sky outside my window was gray, thick with clouds that looked like they were waiting for a cue to cry. I sat on the edge of my bed with my laptop open and the USB drive plugged in, the glowing blue light blinking like a pulse. The voicemail was queued up. I'd replayed it at least 5 times that morning, not because I needed to hear it, but because I needed to feel it, to remind myself I wasn't being dramatic. That I hadn't imagined the desperation in his voice. The dependence. The admission of trust. Jess, please, you're the only one I trust. I can't lose everything. Just, help me. Please. And I had helped. Without hesitation. Without reward. Without holding it over his head like a weapon. But now. I stared down at my phone for what felt like hours, my thumb hovering over Callie's name and my contacts. My chest was tight, and my stomach churned like I'd swallowed a storm. Did I really want to do this? Was it worth it? And more importantly, who would I be after? But then I remembered his voice. That ugly, condescending voice from the hallway just days ago. Jess just floats through life like she's invisible. Honestly, she's not that important. That version of me, the invisible one, she wouldn't have made the call. But I did. It rang twice. Then a soft click. Hello? Her voice was gentle, cautious. Like she wasn't sure who it would be. I cleared my throat. Hi, Callie. It's Jessica. There was a pause. I imagined her eyebrows knitting slightly, her lips pursing in surprise. Oh, hey. Is everything okay? No. Nothing was okay. But I didn't say that. I need to tell you something. And it's not easy. But I'd rather you hear it from me than find out another way. She said nothing, just breathed. I could hear the faint hum of a TV in the background. The sound of fabric rustling. Maybe she was pacing. Mason had an accident last year, I began. A car accident. He was drinking. Not enough to hurt anyone, but enough that he knew he'd be in serious trouble if it got out. He called me in the middle of the night. I picked him up, covered for him, paid off the tow guy. Lied to our parents. And I have the voicemail. From him. Begging for help. Silence. A silence so thick it pressed against my ribs. I'm not telling you this to be cruel, I added quickly. I need you to know who he really is. What he's willing to bury. And how he talks about the people who protect him. I waited for a reaction. Anger. Shock. Confusion. Anything. But she didn't say a word. Not even a gasp. Just breath. Measured. Controlled. Like someone calculating the shape of a truth they already suspected. I can send you the voicemail if you want, I offered, voice low. But I don't think you need it. Still, no reply. But her silence? That silence was the reply. It was louder than a scream. When she hung up, she didn't even say goodbye. I sat there in my room afterward, the phone still clutched in my hand, feeling more hollow than I expected. I thought I'd feel powerful. Righteous. But instead, I felt heavy. Like I'd dropped a stone I'd been carrying for years, only to realize it had fused to my skin. I didn't hear anything for a few hours. I tried to distract myself, made tea, rearranged books, stared blankly at the television. But the anticipation clung to me like humidity. My nerves were electric. My fingers twitchy. I kept checking my phone like it would vibrate any second. And then it did. Mason. I stared at the screen for a long time, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I answered. Before I could say a single word, his voice tore through the line like a dagger. What the hell is wrong with you? No greeting. No hesitation. I trusted you, he snapped, voice full of fire. You said nothing for a whole year and then, what? You decide to blow up my life because I made a joke? My jaw tightened. My fingers dug into the fabric of my sweatpants. It wasn't a joke, Mason. You told your fiancé I was irrelevant. That I float through life. That I'm not important. He scoffed. Actually scoffed. Oh, so now you're twisting my words to make yourself the victim? I laughed once. Dry. Bitter. No need to twist anything. You were pretty clear. There was a pause, followed by the sound of him pacing. I could practically hear his heavy footsteps across hardwood. You're just jealous, he spat. The words hung there. Ugly. Hollow. Lazy. Jealous? I repeated, stunned. He didn't respond. Jealous of what, Mason? I whispered. Being the afterthought? Being constantly compared? Or maybe I'm jealous that you never have to say sorry and people still forgive you? Click. I hung up. Not in anger. Not in sadness. In finality. I didn't scream. I didn't text him paragraphs of hurt. I didn't slam anything. I just let it go. Because I was done holding his mess in my hands. The next day, it happened. Callie left. Just like that. She canceled the engagement. Packed up her things while Mason was at work. Left the key on the counter, along with a folded note I never read but imagined said everything I was too tired to say. She blocked his number. Deleted the photos. Disappeared from his orbit without a sound. And Mason? Mason called me again. Twice. This time, I didn't pick up. He sent a few texts. Callie's gone. Are you happy now? You always wanted to be the center of attention. Congrats. You ruined everything. No, Mason. You did that all on your own. For the first time in his life, no one rushed in to clean up after him. No one stood between him and the fallout. No one saved him from the echo of his own cruelty. And maybe, just maybe, Mason finally realized what it really feels like. To be invisible. I counted them, not intentionally, but like someone counting the number of times a wound throbs, a quiet tally of pain pulsing beneath the surface. Each day passed with a mixture of dull ache and sharper clarity. Some mornings, I felt peace. Others, I felt guilt. And in between, there were moments where I questioned everything. Had I gone too far? Had I become the very thing I hated? But the truth, no matter how many ways I turned it over in my mind, remained the same. I didn't expose Mason out of revenge. I did it because I needed to, not just for Callie, but for me. Because if I had stayed silent, if I had let his version of reality continue to stand unchallenged, then I would have been complicit in my own erasure. Still, that didn't mean it was easy. The fallout was quiet. Eerily quiet. After the initial storm, the screaming phone call, the accusatory texts, there was nothing. Not a word. He stopped trying to reach me after the first week. Callie was gone, moved out of state, according to Mom, who only knew bits and pieces. Dad didn't ask questions. He never did when things got messy. And Mason? Well, Mason disappeared. He didn't show up for Sunday dinners. He didn't call Mom on her birthday. For the first time in what felt like forever, he faded out of the family narrative. And the strange part? No one really filled the space he left behind. They just shifted around it, like a missing piece in a puzzle no one talked about. I started painting again. Real painting. Not doodles in my sketchbook or half-finished watercolors. I bought a canvas, a big one, and set it up in the corner of my room where the morning light hit just right. I didn't know what I was making at first. I just knew I needed to move the feeling somewhere other than my chest. Day by day, the canvas filled. Bold strokes. Deep reds. Blurred edges. It wasn't pretty, but it was true. And for once, I didn't care if anyone understood it. It was mine. Then, one Sunday afternoon, just as spring was softening the edges of winter and the scent of wet earth hung in the air, I heard it. A knock. Not loud. Not urgent. Just steady. I was barefoot in the kitchen, halfway through making coffee, wearing an old hoodie and mismatched socks. My first instinct was to ignore it. I hadn't been expecting anyone. And frankly, I wasn't in the mood for small talk. But something in me stirred. A strange pull, like déjà vu and dread twisted into one. I padded to the door, mug still in hand, and peeked through the peephole. Mason. I froze. His hair was longer than usual, curling slightly at the edges like he hadn't bothered to get it trimmed. He looked tired, not the kind of tired that sleep fixes, but the kind that seeps into your bones. He was wearing a navy windbreaker, one hand in his pocket, the other hanging limply by his side. He rocked on his heels once, eyes fixed on the ground. I didn't move. Part of me wanted to walk away. To pretend I wasn't home. To let him feel what it was like to knock and be met with silence. But I didn't. I opened the door. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The air between us felt thick, weighted with all the things left unsaid, all the cracks, all the bruises, all the silence that had grown into distance. Then, quietly, without pretense or posture, he said, "I'm sorry, Jess. I was wrong." No flashy words. No rehearsed apology. Just that. His eyes met mine, bloodshot, tired, real. And for the first time in years, I saw Mason. Not the golden boy. Not the arrogant voice in every room. Not the wounded ego trying to keep score. Just my brother. I let the moment hang in the air like a held breath. I thought of everything, the voicemail, the call to Callie, the sound of my own voice cracking under the weight of years of invisibility. I thought of the way he'd looked at me like I was small. How easily he'd dismissed me. How casually he'd assumed I'd always be there to catch him. But I also thought of when we were little. How he used to sneak candy into my lunchbox. How he'd once stood up for me in 3rd grade when a girl called me weird. How he'd cried the first time our dog got sick and asked me if it was okay to be scared. And then I smiled. Not a smug smile. Not one of triumph. Just soft. "I know," I said. That was it. I didn't invite him in. He didn't ask to come inside. It wasn't the time. He nodded once, small, barely perceptible, and turned to go. As he walked down the steps, I watched him, my hand still wrapped around the coffee mug that had gone cold. It wasn't closure. Not really. But it was a beginning. The weeks that followed were quiet, but different. Mason didn't come back all at once. He didn't try to reclaim his old space. Instead, he treaded lightly, texting occasionally, offering to help Dad with yard work, asking Mom how her back was feeling. He never brought up what happened. Not directly. But in every gesture, in every attempt to show up without being loud, he was telling me something. That he finally understood. And me? I didn't rush to forgive. I let things unfold in their own time. I set boundaries. I took up space. I spoke without waiting for permission. Funny how people listen differently once they realize you have a voice. We haven't fully healed. Some wounds don't close neatly. Some nights, I still flinch at certain words. Some mornings, I wonder if the peace is real or just another silence waiting to crack. But now, when I speak, Mason doesn't interrupt. He doesn't roll his eyes or make me the punchline. He listens. And maybe that's a start. Maybe that's enough for now. Funny, isn't it? How one phone call, a single choice, can tilt the whole world on its axis. Not because it destroyed someone's life, but because it revealed the truth buried beneath it. That I was never invisible. That my silence was never weakness. That sometimes, the quietest person in the room has the loudest truth to tell. Would I do it again? In a heartbeat.